If you want to support the channel, then please check out my Patreon page to gain access to exclusive videos, take part in Q&As, and watch my retrospectives before they go live on YouTube. Hello, it's Oliver Harper here. This month marks my 10th year producing retrospective reviews on YouTube. When I started back in November of 2011, my first review was on Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. A couple of months ago, my good friend Martin Lakin, who I've known since the late 90s and runs the popular website Supermania78, joined me for a discussion on the last outing of Christopher Reeve as the Man of Steel for my Film Club podcast series. With this celebration of 10 years producing content for YouTube, I've made this podcast available to everyone. So join us as we explore the film's production, its hype at the time back in 1987, its failure with audiences, and why both of us are fascinated with this troubled sequel.
The countdown has begun.
Can we risk not launching?
The world is on the brink.
Prepare to counterattack.
And only one man can save us now.
What a scoop!
Effective immediately, I'm going to rid our planet of all nuclear weapons.
But the greatest threat to Superman is Lex Luthor.
You'd risk worldwide nuclear war for your own personal financial gain.
He's created a being more powerful than the Man of Steel.
Well, smarter than I thought.
You'll pierce his skin.
Dance on his grave.
The dude of steel. Where are you gonna get it?
Is that adorable?
Superman 4, his greatest adventure, The Quest for Peace.
So Martin, what was the hype at the time for Superman 4 back in 1987 in the UK? Were you and your friends excited to see Chris Reeve return? And had you been keeping up with its production through reading Starlog or Starburst magazine, for example?
I remember there being terrific anticipation for it, actually. The general perception is of Superman 3 that it didn't kind of perform to expectations or whatnot, and it was a flop. It wasn't a flop at all by any means. It just didn't make the kind of figures that 1 and 2 had made, and obviously the Sarkines were accustomed to that. But 2 more failures later, being Supergirl and Santa Claus, none of this was apparent. I mean, there was no mention of the fact that we'd kind of lost the franchise to canon. There was no mention of that, I remember. And the best source of everything back in the day used to be newspapers, because they would follow shooting round. And the first instance I saw of it, the first glance I'd caught was there was a pictorial of Christopher Reeve and Mariel Hemingway in the nightclub. They were shooting at London's Hippodrome nightclub, and I think the headline is something like Superman has a super new girl or something like that. And from that point on, because it looks so fantastic. It was a black and white newspaper. It's not all that exciting, but for somebody that's been waiting since 1983, it's a big deal. So I was really captivated by that, because obviously Mariel Hemingway was a new addition to the cast, and she, stunning girl. And then as shooting progressed, I remember it because it was my birthday, actually. On the 4th of October 1986, in a copy of the Daily Mirror, they were shooting at Baldock, and they were doing the tornado scene, and Christopher Reeve was on set with his daughter Alexandra. And I think the Sun were being mean to him. I think they were saying something like Superman looks like a super slob, because the guy was stood there in his flying harness still. And it was obviously between takes, and the poor guy was just holding on to his little girl, and he'd been papped, and he had a bit of overhang thanks to the the leather corset the poor guy was strapped into. So there was coverage, and it was sporadic, and it was exciting because of that. But there was no kind of inclination at all that there was no reason to not believe it was going to be just as incredible as any of the films preceding it.
I've tried looking for old TV spots for Superman 4 for like the UK side of things, and there's nothing. So I thought, okay, Canon probably didn't do much in terms of TV advertising at all. But a trailer would have been the safest bet to have seen something before you saw the movie.
Of course, what we know now is that even the title was a late addition. I mean, it was just called plain old Superman 4 right up until, I think, God, until the editing stage. And my first exposure to it proper was I was coming home from holiday in Western Supermare, and they had the 30 by 40 quad on the outside of the cinema, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. And I was like, whoa, okay. Because that was a big deal too. I mean, that was the first time that the series had deviated from just the numerical kind of advancement. To have a subtitle, The Quest for Peace was very intriguing. But no, I think the first time I saw a trailer was maybe on. It must have been on videotape. It must have been on
right.
for some of the Canon film, because let's face it, they were plentiful at the time, and. regardless of quality, and again, if you watch the trailer now, as far as I'm concerned, I think it's a terrific trailer, the original one. The one.
I think the Canon one.
The Canon one,
really good.
The greatest hope against nuclear war. I was like, what's not to love about that? And so, for somebody 12, 13 like I was like, I cannot wait to see this again, because he looks terrific. The action looks brilliant. Oh, the cast are back. Everybody's there. Everything's as it should be. It's gonna be awesome. How can you miss? And obviously that was Canon's mandate anyhow. It's like, we buy this property, we get everybody back regardless of how much it costs, and we just throw any old stuff out there, and idiots, well, target audience like me will just go crazy for it. And to a certain extent that's what happened as well. I mean, it's not like it lacked the draw. I think that word of mouth just killed it stone dead.
I think you're right. It's when I saw like a 35mm print of it, it's about 5-6 years ago. They played that and Street Smart in London. I'm surprised you didn't turn up, Martin. I should have probably reminded you at the time. Because I went there with our good friend Tim, and the print of Superman 4 was mint condition. It's like the movie played for a week or two at max, and then was just pulled from theatres.
Yeah.
And there was someone there who had worked for Canon, like Canon Cinemas, and they said, it didn't last long. The print was like, the Blu-ray itself, people like to adjust the colours and adjust Superman's outfit to look a bit different.
Yeah.
That's when I saw that 35mm print, I thought that's pretty much spot on to the Blu-ray. Did you see the film in the Canon Theatre at the time?
I saw Superman for the first time in West Bromwich, and it was the King's 1, 2, 3, which was the biggest kind of or the most local cinema to us, and on the top floor was the biggest screen, and I saw it there.
What was your first reaction to it? Were you just like, as soon as that Canon logo came in with the Superman theme, you must have been super excited until I suppose the credits started rolling. You're like, oh, what's happening?
No, from the outset, as soon as you hear that initial, boom, 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 I was like, oh, yeah, because it's the music, and I don't care who you are. If you're a fan of these things and you go to a proper cinema and you sit there and you listen to that theme come through those speakers, and it rumbles underneath you like a plane taking off, I couldn't care less. I mean, it was, I knew the credits were different. I was like, oh, glitter, okay, that's interesting. And I knew I'd read somewhere that the background plates of Earth were taken from NASA, so I was kind of interested in that too.
Yeah.
But from the opening scene, when I was like, we're back in space. Superb, because the opening of Superman 3 takes place in a doll office, as I recall, and I was like, yeah. So to open in space again was a big deal. And then that first scene, which I think is one of the best in the picture, I have to say. I mean, because I'm going to talk about I'd like to talk about the effects a bit more in a bit anyway. But that the opening scene where the wire work with Chris being brought into that satellite. And then when he brings the astronaut back, and then he speaks Russian.
Yeah.
And then the subtitle comes up and it said, "Notice Buddha Vadovich does for Daniel. So sleep up." I was, wow. So because it's I've never heard him speak Russian before. It
also plays into the fact that Superman is a world superhero. He's not just represents America. He represents everyone. And that was like,
yes.
I suppose Chris's way of sort of saying, hey, look, we're going to have him speak Russian, and then later on.
He speaks Italian. Apparently, there's a scene cut as well that he speaks Japanese in as well. And I don't know what scene that is, but apparently there's a very strong possibility that was shot too. But yeah, absolutely. I think one of the reasons that it endures for me, and one of the reasons that I adore it so much, is because it does have, for better or worse, it has Chris Reeve's stamp all over it. I mean, you can tell that it was the passion project, or it was at least, everybody talks about the good intentions of Superman 4, like, it's like as if it's some kind of excuse for what actually ended up. But I don't think you need to make any excuses. I mean, it is kind of there to see. There's a whole kind of subtext about, when he originally spoke to Tom Mankiewicz about, how do I go ahead and do this? Because basically Canon have given this to me. I can go ahead and make the kind of picture that, or at least have Superman do what I want him to do. What do you think? And Tom Mankiewicz, rather sage advice, because it's Tom Mankiewicz, what you expect, was to stay away from anything that Superman can fix. And, Chris was kind of like, well, I'm going to kind of fly in the face of that, for want of a better expression. And I'm going to see what the extent of this character could be. I'm going to give it the same kind of verisimilitude. I'm going to try to apply it to real world. But, my way around this, and if you watch him being interviewed at the time, it's like, all of the American journalists are trying to force this kind of like, well, Superman has a cause, doesn't he, in this picture? And he's like, no, he doesn't have any cause. He answers the call from as a friend, and that's something totally different. And that's very evident in the picture, because he does go to that young lad, he just goes to Jeremy, and in the print that isn't cut, he says, look, this is the most important letter I've ever received, but I can't do this. This is kind of like he kind of answers that query and says, look, I'm supposed to not interfere in things of this magnitude, therefore I'm sorry, I can't help you with this. And then, it snowballs into, the storyline that we all know and love. But even back then, I mean, bear in mind, this is 1986. For some people, this is millennia ago. It's just a part of history that nobody would believe politically at the time. And especially in the context of the Cold War, this was a real thing. People were actually frightened. It's hard to put this across now. I mean, I couldn't say to my boy who's 8 years old, I couldn't say to him, well, look, son, there was a time where it looked as if, the two superpowers that have been at each other's kind of throats for the last 15, 20 years. This was a possibility. The technological stage that we were at, where we could actually, destroy ourselves, was a thing. It wasn't made up. The basis was completely in reality. And so I think Chris was kind of brave to take that and ask the question, well, actually, what if there was somebody out there that could literally solve this problem by just disposing of the whole damn thing, and at the same time trying to open our eyes to the preposterousness of the situation we got ourselves into. And so from that point of view, without it's never going to be an Oscar contender. It's never going to be, it's not a huge message film, but it is nevertheless a very interesting kind of essay on the state of the world at the time, as it was.
Yeah. I mean, did you have any sort of inclination before going in to see the film that it had been cut to shreds? I mean, or did you just kind of went in there oblivious and just enjoyed it for what it was at the time? Did your friends love it, or was it just kind of, you just go by with your dad or your mum?
So this is where it kind of becomes undone, because I came out of the showing that I saw, and I was jumping, I was hopping up and down, because it was the best thing I'd ever bloody seen at that point, But I was just overcome at the fact that, there was another Superman film. I mean, these things, again, back in the day, they were an event. It's not like these days where you can stream everything and have the best quality of everything just come straight to you. You would have to go and see it, and that's a fundamental difference. And so, I was bouncing around. I mean, I remember I think my favorite shot in the whole film was the wire shot of when he flies away from the Great Wall of China, because it was like, that is a big, broad, widescreen shot, and it's live, and you can see that it's actually happening. And I thought, wow, that was magnificent. It just really reminded me of like the action comics of the time. I mean, the Silver Age action comics, which had these kind of preposterous storylines that were grounded in some kind of reality, that had the massive oversized props, like the nuclear net and all that kind of stuff. That was, I mean, yeah, you giggle, but that was massively commonplace in a, you pick up an action.
Well, that's what Superman would do in those cartoons from like the 60s or late 60s, early 70s. He'd do crazy stuff like that.
It was no stretch for a fan. And so, if I picked up an issue of Action Comics from the stands in 1983, I would expect to see that kind of action go on. And so for me, I knew it was different than the prior pictures because it wasn't such a science fiction epic. That's the only real distinction I made. But I thought it was a huge improvement on Superman 3 because it was about Superman. It was about his plight. And it wasn't, there weren't kind of cutaway scenes to another storyline entirely with Richard Pryor. I never understood that. That made no sense to me. But this was completely focused. But anyway, to answer your question, I came out of it. I came out of the first screening bouncing, and this is back in the day where people would queue all the way around an entire cinema to watch a film, which sounds ridiculous now. It's like, well, why would anybody do that? Why would anybody waste time in the pouring rain, standing to watch a film? But I assure you, kids, that's what we did.
I did it for Jurassic Park. I waited in the rain for Jurassic Park. So
all the way around the block, and it would be a queue of 200-300 people. And I was coming out, because I'd gone to see it with my mum and my sister, who just completely, they were totally indifferent to it. But I'd come out, and I saw a school friend of mine was waiting in the queue to go and see it, and he grabbed me. I didn't see him. He grabbed me and he says, "Yo, Martin, was it any good? Was it any good?" I said, "Mate, it's the best film ever made." And he's like, "Is it?" And it was one of those situations where everybody was kind of like, they'd seen me come out, and I was just like, I was shining like a star, and all these other people were looking at me, and the air of expectation from everybody. Due to me, when I said, "Look, you're gonna love it, you're gonna love it," and everybody was like rubbing their palms together almost at the anticipation of this. And I said to my mum says, I looked at my mum, and she just says, "Go ahead." So I just hooked up with this kid, and I went and watched it again. So I watched it twice. Wow. Yeah, they just waited for me for another 90 minutes, and I came out the other end. And then I went to see it again with my dad, and we came out of the showing, and he was silent. And that's not like him. I remember when I was a kid, he took me to see Flash Gordon, and he was really hyped up after that. And, he was like, he drove us home through all the car tunnels in Birmingham, and we were pretending it was a rocket cycle and all that kind of stuff. He was mad for it. He was terrific that way, my dad. But he was strangely silent when we came out of Superman 4. I remember saying to him, well, I enjoyed it. And he just went, And I was like, wow. I was like, I wonder why he didn't like it. It was decades later. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this was like, as recently as about 5 or 6 years ago. And obviously, me being associated with this film now, he casually just dropped to me in conversation that he says, "Oh yeah," he says, "I remember that. I remember when they were making that. They did it. Where was it now?" And I said, "Milton Keynes." And he said, "Oh yeah, that was it. I'd seen it on the news the night before." And he said they were going to be shooting it at the weekend outside the train station, and I was going to take you down. He said to me, I knew it was happening, so I knew exactly where it was, and I was going to drive you down. He says, but something else happened, and I can't remember what it was. And he's telling me this, and I'm just looking across it. I think we were in the pub actually, and he just bought me a pint. He'd sat down, and he put the pint in front of me, and he looked at me, and he was like, what's the matter? And I was like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah. It's like, so you knew.
I would have slapped him.
you knew this was going ahead. And he was like, yeah. He said, yeah, on the news they had, what's his name, Steve Reeves, and they were flying him. And I was like, Dad. And I was like, it's like, have I done something wrong? I says, no, well, it's a bit late now, it's 1986. He says, that was it. I think we had to go to your nan's for something. And it was the most mundane, pitiful excuse for like not taking me down. And yeah, I was tempted never to forgive him, but these things happen. But God, yeah,
I would have strangled my dad.
Well, the thought went through my mind. But again, in reference to what you asked earlier, it's like how much of it was out there being publicized, and the fact is that it did make the evening news. I mean, yeah, because because
on your website, Supermania 78, you've had newspaper clippings, sort of, the local papers are covering it. And also, you mentioned earlier about the Sun as well, but the local in Milton Keynes were sort of saying, "Hey, look, Chris is back. He's filming at this school with the kid that is Jeremy, and the stuff that's kind of taking place in the centre of Milton Keynes." So, yeah, there was some coverage, but I suppose you had to sort of be kind of interested in the making of a movie, and two, be like Superman. But looking back now, there seemed to be a lot less restrictions on security, so people could just sort of turn up and just start taking photographs from a distance, and they've got some, hidden treasures there they've probably got stashed away for the last 30 years.
Oh, goodness me. For the town, especially for Milton Keynes itself, this was a huge deal without having the stigma of, obviously, looking back, hindsight 30 years later, we know the kind of reputation the film's got. But, a Superman film coming, not only, they shot them all in England anyway, but doing location work in this town, it was a big deal. Everybody, all the residents knew about it. Everybody knew about it. And I've got some photos, exactly as you described, from a fella that was working in the, I think he was on the 4th or 5th floor of the train station. And, he was one of the few people in town that knew nothing about it. And the first inkling that he got that something was going on is that Chris flew past him. Now,
that's mad.
Could you imagine what that must have been like? You wouldn't. The tinted windows. If you've seen the railway station, it's a lovely building in Milton Keynes, and it's got a mirrored front. And he said that because these windows were tinted, you couldn't see any trace of wires or anything like that. And the guy flew directly past him, and he was like, "What in the hell is that?" And then obviously you look out the window, and then Chris does another 14 takes of the same thing, just trying to get the shot. But can you imagine? Yeah. It's like, at the time, it was amazing. 30 years later, to people like us, it would have just been breathtaking. It's one of those things where it's like witnessing, I don't know, witnessing the birth of Christ or something. To give if you could go back to the future and see something, that would certainly be it for me. Imagine if it's somebody putting the going back to '66 and seeing England win the World Cup. It's that kind of thing, geek equivalent, if you like, for people inclined like us. But so it was a big deal in Milton Keynes, and
because when I was filming the Superman 4 Man of Glass and Steel documentary, and we were trying to find we filmed stuff at Elstree. And then we went, I think maybe about a month or two later, we went to try and find the airfield where Lex is kind of there to, to steal the rocket or put Nuclear Man's kind of device thing on the rocket. Yes. And we kind of knew where it was, we just couldn't find it. And it was just it was an absolute nightmare. So we got a taxi cab to get somewhere. And a taxi guy goes, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, we're filming stuff for Superman 4, like trying to find the locations." He goes, when I was at Elstree, he said, like he kind of helped out there or something. No, he'd lived nearby. And he said kids and stuff, you could just walk through the doors at Elstree. And kids would walk in at weekends and they'll see they're filming stuff and Chris Reeve was there. Let's walk up to him, have a chat with him, get his autograph. Nowadays, that would be impossible. You could not do that.
Oh, can you imagine? It's a totally different world now. As I said, I've got pictures from Milton Keynes, and they're shooting in the square, and they've got all the technical gear, all the trucks with the lighting and whatnot. But there are no barriers there. You could just drive up to that frontage, and you could have spent the entire day there if you wanted. Because again, there'd be a good year between what was shot and obviously what came out at the cinemas, and it was just something that happened and went away, and you'd forget all about it. And people were curious, they'd take pictures, but they'd politely go away. There wouldn't be any of this somebody hanging around just to see if they could rob his cape or anything like that, or any prop dealers or autograph dealers or any of the parasites that are out there just trying to get a piece of something. It's a different age entirely. And so it doesn't surprise me that Elstree was any different. But again, Elstree was only being utilized in the first place because it was Cannon's new toy.
It was a shame, wasn't it? Because Pinewood was so pissed off that they were moving away from there because they had the Zoptic system and front projection stuff. I'm not sure if they were going to do Zoptics again on it. They'd probably just do like a variation of it like they did with Supergirl, which is kind of Derek Meddings had supervised that, hadn't he? Because there was no Zoptics involved. It was just, I suppose, a modified version of it,
I'm not exactly sure that they were given. I think once they, I mean, could you imagine what it must have been like for the Pinewood board just to say, well, actually, lads, we're going to be shooting the next one in Elstree. You must be kidding. You know, all the facilities we've got here. We've done 3 prior pictures with you. We have all the kit. And you're telling us you're going to go there where they've got literally nothing. I mean, they've just got a blue screen, and it's not going to be of the quality. And you know, they must have thought they were mad. I'm not sure they were given access to it, especially the front projection stuff. I'm not sure that they. It's like, well, you know what, you've made your bed, so you know, you go make your picture.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, obviously, Martin, you know, you've been collecting a lot of Superman memorabilia over the years, and you know, there's 4 movies to sort of collect stuff for. When it came to Superman 4 stuff, at the time, you know, there was also the usual stuff we find, isn't it? Where it's press kits, film programs, posters, and so forth. Did you, you know, at that age, sort of see much kind of floating around for Superman 4 in the UK? Or was it just like you saw it in a magazine and that was kind of it?
Yeah, it was so disappointing. I mean, there was the Starlight poster magazine that came out in advance of the film.
Yeah. It's a great magazine.
It's a great magazine.
Spoiler heavy with like deleted scenes.
Well, but again, that we didn't know they were deleted at the time.
No.
And so, you know, you go and see the film, and afterwards you go, hang on, where the bloody hell was Clive Mantle? Or where was, you know, where was this shot? Where was that shot? You know, where was the shot by his parents' grave? All that kind of stuff that was included in the poster magazine. And you're just
I feel sorry for the Americans because they had even more scenes cut. So
they did. It was even shorter. Yeah. To lose the tornado scene and the Red Square is another blow, really. But I was just shattered because apparently the idea was because 1988 was going to be the 50th anniversary. And I think that I think 4 was going to be released at a later point to coincide with the 50th celebrations, and it was going to be a big deal. And I think after the test screenings, everybody literally got cold feet. They literally took 2 reels out of it. That was a criteria set by Warner Brothers. Take 2 reels out. It was thrown out there, and as you said, it was quickly disappeared. And so there was no merchandise. There were a few books which were fine, but again, and the comic book adaptation. But all that happened was that you bought those and you read those, and they were kind of like they contained the storyline for the entire picture, whereas what we saw was something approximating it. From that point on, it was just kind of like, and then they did that 50th anniversary special hosted by Dana Carvey, which is practically unwatchable. I mean,
as a kid, I had such a memory
garbage
of that. Like,
from that.
Just the ending, because I missed half of it because it was played in the. They showed it in the UK, didn't they? So I think it must have been on ITV or BBC or something. And I saw the bit near the end where, in my memory as a kid, it was like this amazing animation of Superman turns up and he's standing there. And then I watched it years later when it was on the DVD. I thought, this is fucking garbage. And I just couldn't believe that was it. That was like one of the laziest things I've ever seen.
Well, can you imagine the anticipation with that as well? Because, the Radio Times listings or whatnot, I mean, it says his name. With Christopher Reeve, and so you're expecting him to have a bigger contribution than he did, because he's interviewed for about I think he's got like a 1.5 minute slot, and you don't see him again. And I was like, oh my god, and what is all this other garbage that I'm being kind of like put through just to get to the end? And just as you say, this horrific animation shows up at the end, and they've got all these other poor guys in these spandex costumes, and it's like, here's the Flash, and this guy steps out in this god-awful suit, and ladies and gentlemen, the Green Lantern. I'm like, well, I bet he's so happy at the prospect of not having to partake in this. But
I think Chris was probably so burnt out or burned from Superman 4 that he didn't want to take part in any more of this stuff.
I mean, if he was anybody other than Christopher Reeve, he wouldn't even have spoke about it again, I don't think. But because he was so genial, and he was asked about it a lot in interviews, because it was always, whenever he showed up on talk shows, you'll know. I mean,
like Wogan.
I mean, you're the guy that kind of archives these clips so well, and salvages them for the rest of us. But anybody asks him, and he's kind of like, well, I don't dwell on on previous encounters, and maybe I should have stopped after 2, but we thought we had something. And he never said, he said that we rip people off. That's what he said. And that's probably the most diplomatic way of saying it. We rip people off. Actually, that wasn't down to him, but he still shouldered the responsibility of the performance of the
He
picture.
took the blame. He took the blame for Superman 4, which I don't think he should have done. I don't think
Not
he
at
should have
all.
done fully, because it was
Not at all.
there's a massive problem with Cannon, but also Sidney J. Fury was just, I don't think he really knew what he was doing.
No.
From different various sources, people, sort of heartbroken, sort of watching him direct, and then other people were like, oh, he was a very nice person, but didn't really, I think Chris was very much in charge, and I don't think he sort of wanted to put his foot in.
Thanks to you, there is a clip out there of I think it's a kind of documentary on the Go-Go Boys, but not the two official ones. But there is a sequence where Menachem Golan is on the phone, and Christopher Reeve was on the other end, literally busting his balls about the fact that. Bear in mind, Christopher's he was 33 at the time shooting for, wasn't he? And
younger than us, it's crazy.
He's younger than us.
Thinking now.
And yet there he is on the phone to a movie mogul, if you like, at the time, saying, well, you've got me along, you're financing in Street Smart, but you're telling me that if you've not got the money to shoot in New York for Street Smart, how do I know that you've got the cash to put forward for Superman 4? So he's already there, rightly busting his balls, because when Menachem gets off the phone, he's kind of like, who is he to say, he can't speak to me in that way. So, well, I'm glad he did, pal, because, otherwise, God knows what we would have ended up with. And it's, again, that's just one example of the absolute plethora of things that make this picture so fascinating.
It all comes with, I think my obsession with the film, and probably yours as well, is that the making of the movie is so fascinating, I think, compared to the end results. It's how it was all put together and what was kind of going through people's minds about the film. Because my introduction to Superman 4 was it was through VHS. I was too young to see it at cinema. I was kind of unaware. I think the first film I saw was Ninja Turtles in 1990. So my parents weren't really kind of like into movies. Later through early 90s they'd take us. So when I saw images of Superman 4, I went to my local, I think it was a co-op or something like that, and there was a piece of food like on the shelf, and had a competition to win tickets to see Superman 4. And then I saw, another memory was seeing the poster in the video shop when it came out to VHS, and then on TV, and I'm sure it was a kids show, maybe it was Going Live or Live and Kicking in 80s. I can't remember which show it was, but they were kind of modifying the Madame Tussauds waxwork.
Really?
And they had the Superman 4 standee where he's got the rocket in his arm, and it's standing next to it, so they're trying to look at that for cross-reference with the statue, as it were.
Oh, really?
I just cannot find that for love nor money, that clip. And then when I eventually saw the film, I absolutely loved it, because it was Superman 2. It's got action at the beginning, saves the kid at Niagara Falls, and it's all kind of at the end. There's a bit obviously at the White House, but the action's at the end. And John Victor Smith wasn't really an action editor like Stuart Baird. He didn't have the flair of him, the speed.
Right.
So when you come to see Superman 4, Superman 3 as well is a bit, a little bit clunky in terms of when you look at contemporary films at the time of editing. Like, you look at Return of the Jedi, it's lightning fast editing to get the rhythm. But, it's still got some good action in it, but it's still a bit stagey. Superman 4, things are a lot quicker. They are, action is really fast paced, and probably to cover up some of the failings of the opticals or showing too much of the miniatures to reveal something. But I thought it was, as a kid, it felt like an action-packed Superman film. And it was kind of what I wanted to see at that age. And when you sort of get older, you kind of realise, okay, the story doesn't make much sense and a lot's missing. And that all came back round to when I sort of stumbled across the website Superman Cinema and how I sort of, with the forums and how I met you, and just kind of the discovery of this kind of, you already knew this information before I did, and then finding that Starlog magazine about Superman 4, and then all this amazing kind of footage. And well, in the stills, it all looks incredible, seeing that Nuclear Man 1 fight and so forth.
Oh, I mean, what you're talking about, great times back then, when you're kind of the infancy of the internet, really. I mean, Superman Cinema, Dharmesh's site was kind of like yeah, it was like finding the Ark of the Covenant. That thing was. It was just, yeah, and especially with the forums and whatnot, with everybody coming forward to say that, I've got a nugget here, I've got a nugget there. Maybe you haven't seen this. There's a clip of this. Here's a newspaper clipping. Here's a bit more information, and it just snowballed from the smallest tidbits to I can remember like Andy Mangel's column in magazines like Fantazone, I think it was, and just junk that was freely available at the time. I just soak it up, and the back pages of a magazine called Comic Scene that had the listing of everything that was coming out or in production at the time, movie wise. And there was no reason to believe that the whole thing, even though it was a debacle, I didn't realize just how big a debacle it was, because obviously then came Superboy, utilizing most of the the same crew, the same talent as the Superman films, and the 5 was rumored for the longest time, and there was no reason for me to not think that this was going to go on and on, and okay, so 4 was a bad result, but 3 preceding it wasn't that terrific either. So there's we've only got the another level to gun for. I think I at the time, bearing in mind that limited access to any kind of information, and that's what we just took as read, whatever was published, that it would continue. But yeah, as it turns out, and historically now, as this many years later, as I've tried to, I say me, the whole community, yourself included, have actually done their best to kind of put together the entire story. I've spent a lot of money and time kind of trying to accrue this kind of stuff. But I had found in a dusty corner in a comic shop this book, and it just had Superman 4 on the cover. So it was obviously before the title was changed, and it was kind of, I've never seen anything like it actually. It was kind of like it wasn't a press pack. It was kind of like just a thick volume of kind of like the documenting the entire process, and I read that cover to cover over and over. There was stuff in that. It gave the locations. It told you all about Milton Keynes. It told you how they got to that point and how they decided on that was the best place to do it. And so that kind of became a little Bible for me, because every time that somebody asked me a question, I'd refer back to that and say, well, actually, stuff like the, silly things like the statue in the Metropolis Museum, the big thing that they'd put together for that. Even very recently, I've got some pictures of that where they've hacked it down, and there's like there's bits of it all over the floor, and there's a little girl there that has a picture taken with it, and apparently it was Gene Hackman's idea to destroy the thing just out of spite. It wasn't something
really?
that. Yeah,
so that was the photo, because you had a photo, didn't you, of it on your website? And I thought that's like we thought it might be an extended scene, but it's actually just a.
It was supposed to be symbolic, I think, but I think they were planning to shoot something around it. But in the end, I think they just toppled the thing. And the guy that had built it, he was a really famous sculptor, and his name escapes me at the moment. But he'd done the Ming faces in the Flash Gordon sets and that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So to have his art desecrated that way, because they were going to donate it, that thing.
They should have done. It should have stayed in Milton Keynes.
It should have stayed exactly where it was, shouldn't it? It should still be there now. Should be right outside the Bannatyne bloody gym, just advertising.
Definitely.
Look what you can aspire to. But no, they it's heartbreaking, but they destroyed it. That is just one little tiny nugget of absolutely useless information that can be.
But it's like, it's gold dust to us, it's
gold
like,
dust.
oh, we want that,
Yeah.
That's what you want. We were told for so many years, weren't we, that the extended cut was destroyed, which was just like, I don't know where that came from. And there was also rumours, when we were on the internet in the late 90s, that the extended cut was shown on this American channel that they later confirmed was just a joke. It wasn't, it wasn't true.
No.
So, when Warner sort of said, okay, we put the deleted scenes out on the DVD, they found it was obviously from a scoring print, because you got the timing of the wipes going past. Were you kind of maybe somewhat underwhelmed when you saw the extended scenes? Had it lived up to your expectations? Or maybe I think our expectations were too high at the time.
Well, to begin with, it was absolute catharsis for me. I could not believe it. I mean, it was '06, wasn't it? I think when it was all part of the returns deal, wasn't it? But my first glance of it was I didn't believe any of it until I saw the list, the BBFC list of what they'd had to see to certify. And it had all the list of the deleted scenes there. And I wept a little. I'm not going to lie. I mean, as a grown man, I saw it and I was like, because again, just like precisely as you say, we were up until that point, that did not exist. The print had been deleted. There was absolutely no chance you were going to see this. Fans, guys, people that love this, it was never going to happen. You're never going to see it. It's gone. And then all of a sudden, there's a bloody great list of all these things that are going to be included. You're damn right I wept. I was absolutely overcome. And then I think, you know, I think the statement that Warner's made at the time was, we have found all the footage. Now, that to me means you've found all the footage. So all of it. So you've recovered that print. You've recovered the full cut that Sidney Furie delivered to you that you used as test screeners. That was my interpretation of it. And so when it actually came to it, and you know, obviously the Blu-ray came out, and you watch these things, I was just like, okay. Obviously, you know, I mean, they're pretty unwatchable, except for I think the ones that really add something. Gene Hackman scenes. I think the way that he plays off both the UN against the Russian spy.
He's banging his shoe.
He's some of Hackman's best work was lost because and again it's an incredibly important plot point as well, because it's like, well, Luthor is again behind the scenes doing what he does, and in no other incarnation of Luthor do they do this particularly, but he's a devious sod. Hackman's Luthor, and he's always he's always behind this. He's not so ostentatious, he's not in your face, he's not this megalomaniac businessman. He's just manipulating things behind the scenes. And I thought they lost some of his best work there. The version of and I will say the version of the Nuclear Man 1 fight with that temp track, what the hell was that?
It's like someone's included it to sabotage it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like kind of like, we told you so. We dropped all this for a reason. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I know that Sidney J. Furie, in his biography, said he delivered Warner Brothers the finished film. The effects are finished, not like what we see in the rough cut. They are finished to Superman 4's standard. So that does exist. And Warner Brothers have said they've found that. They've got that in the archive. So it's sitting there, you know.
It's sitting there. Doesn't it make you sick?
Makes you annoyed, because it's like, just put it out there. During this whole pandemic, COVID, they could have put this out on Blu-ray. Everyone's at home watching stuff.
Would have made a lot of people happy.
Yeah. And it's, you know, when I saw those deleted scenes, it was when I got that box set, that tin box set thing.
Yep, me too.
I finished work quite late at night. It's about 9 p.m. So I rushed home, quickly opened it up, watched those deleted scenes straight away. It's like the time when they released the Alien quadrilogy set. I just had to watch the Alien 3 documentary, because Alien 3 was the fascinating one, you know, behind the scenes.
Yes, it was.
So it was just like watching the Superman 4 thing, see those deleted scenes. Yeah. And I was kind of like, I wasn't heartbroken at all. It was great to see more of Chris, and it was great to also hear some of the kind of the score, the actual proper score in the cutaways. Got Lacey in his arms, and got, you know, Nuclear Man's turned into a rocket. All of Alexander Courage's score is there. Sounds wonderful. But it was kind of like a bit of a letdown seeing that the Nuclear Man 1 fight, because they'd spent apparently, you know, like $4 or $5 million on it, and it's so kind of poorly covered. So, but Clive had said, you know, that's not what he remembers what they'd shot, because they covered it from so many different angles. So you know, you can probably create something better out of the edit. I mean, they've got the stuntman kind of clearly on camera flying past as he gets thrown. You know, it's like, who would shoot that close up? It's clearly not Chris, you know.
No, it is. The whole thing is, I mean, especially again, I mean, because the money was there. I mean, I've got that shot of the exterior of the Metro Club that they built, which is an absolute neon nightmare. It's just, it's incredible. Beautiful.
It is amazing.
It's amazing that, you know, that what they. I mean, anybody that wants to see that, they can get in touch with me. But the scene itself, it didn't make any sense. It had that really weird temp track that somebody actually went to the trouble of finding. I think, didn't they? It was on some kind of children's record.
It's a BBC show from early 80s. Yeah. Yeah,
and some of the shots in it are just. No, so I kind of made up my mind that that's not what that's something else. That's not representative, because when you listen to the Courage score, especially for that sequence where the Nuclear Man fight. It's incredible. It's
really good. Isn't it?
Superb. Cue that one is. So yeah, it's more deserved. But again, until we get, I mean, this is the same old thing from me. Until we see the whole thing, I don't think you've seen it at all. It's like anything else, isn't it? I mean, you can't really make a final judgment about that picture until you've seen the whole thing, because there are parts that are incoherent. I mean, this whole business about where is the woman, and you're like, even when I'm 13, I'm like, hang on, how does it? Well, what woman?
Even I was about 8 or something. I was like, that makes no sense.
How do you know which woman? And so when you go back and you look, and it's like, oh, okay, so his residual memory is from your first version that we haven't seen is what's remembered. And
do you think Warner Brothers could have possibly salvaged it a little bit better with maybe perhaps just cutting out the Nuclear Man 1 plot and just kept in some of the extra moments where you got more of Lacey, you got more of Chris, and you've got this sort of the speech at the end, which is extended. Even having Jeremy in is fun. I mean, I love Clive Mantle. He's a great guy. He's really cool, really cool bloke.
He is. He's lovely.
But if you'd in some way kind of cut out that character, it could have made it. The film would have made sense, I think, still a little bit more. But it's because it's just kind of its shortcomings is like the desperation of just cutting out 2 reels. I know because Clive said to me years ago when I spoke to him on the phone, he said Sidney J. Fury just sort of phoned him up and said that you're being cut from the movie because the audience didn't understand your character, which was a massive lie, I think, because it was like this kind of bizarro character. That's what it kind of is. He's not the Nuclear Man we come to know, but he's just like a weird copy of Superman, but
he's literally Bizarro. And in fact, for the comic book historians out there, if you get John Byrne's Man of Steel series, which was coming out at the same time that 4 was being shot, there is a character in that series that is more or less exactly the same as Clive Mantle's Nuclear Man, and he fights him in the same manner as he fights himself in Part 3. John Byrne actually did a much better take as an amalgamation of 3 and 4 in that comic series. But to get to the point, I mean, yes, he was phoned 2 days before he was supposed to attend the premiere with his mum. I mean, imagine that. I mean, that must have been
heartbreaking
to be told that you're taken out of it. And yes, that's not the reason. I mean, of course, he from the scenes that we do luckily have now, you can tell exactly the kind of thing that he was trying to portray, and he did. It's obvious that he kind of modeled the whole thing on Lenny of Mice and Men, where he was just a big unwieldy kind of damage-inducing lunk. And he played that perfectly. But I mean, to go back to the point you're making, there is if you did drop that subplot, there's absolutely no excuse for not including those other scenes. So it just must be a case of take 2 reels out, and we don't care what they are. Nobody ever saw it.
It's a shame that no one got to get hold of. It was the editor was it John Shirley?
John Shirley.
He obviously passed away a number of years ago, but it's a shame no one managed to reach out to him and say, "Look, what the hell? What the hell happened there?" As a fan of watching Chris Reeve fly, Superman 4 probably has some of the best of the sort of takeoffs and landings, like in camera wire work. The opticals wise, I mean, they do kind of in some ways sort of introduce kind of different angles, but obviously down to the shortcomings of they've had to repeat a number of shots. But when it came to the takeoffs and landings, absolutely superb stuff.
The live flying in Superman 4 is of a spectacular standard, mainly due to Bob, what's his name?
Is it Bob Harmon?
Bob Harmon, who only passed recently, God bless him. He'd been there since the very beginning. And, I think that their collaboration had just got to the point between him and Chris where, it was just, I mean, there are some missteps. I mean, the takeoff from the moon could have done with another take. But apart from that, I mean, again, it was a revelation to me recently that my favorite shot that I spoke about earlier when he flies over the Great Wall, that's not even bloody Chris, that's Mark Stewart. And Mark Stewart was thoroughly convincing. And, I've been in touch with Mark Stewart a few times, and I'm sure that out of everybody that is, still with us in this lifetime, thank God, he knows a spectacular amount of what went on in that picture. And I've been, I've more or less pleaded with him to, come forward and talk about it. But he's a tough nut to crack. Again, that's a real source of frustration for me, because I'm like, I've said, look, I'll put your story out there, but I don't know if he's ready. To get to your point about the effects, I mean, I've been really wanting to talk about the fact that I think that the reputation that the picture has got nowadays, and even starting from when it first came out, the fundamental problem with it is that the effects are in such a shape that they act to take you out of the picture. In other words, the story bobs along quite nicely, I think. Like you said, the editing is nice and swift. The story, gets itself going quick. There's no fat on it. I mean, there's nothing left of it, but there's certainly there's no fat on it. And it does bounce around from one scene to another. So when you cut to the blue screen shots of Chris flying towards you, they are so bad that they distract you to the point where you're not actually looking at him flying anymore. You're going, what's going on there? And you're not concentrating on the story anymore. You're trying to figure out why that looks so poor. And with all the other subsequent shots in the film that don't work, I mean, my favorite, I say favorite, I absolutely detest it, is when when he says destroy Superman now, and they face off and they go through Luthor's balcony and they drop. And they're doing this funny little fight as they're dropping at a rate of knots. And then all of a sudden, they part, and then Chris just go, and there's a sound effect that accompanies this. And if you're familiar with the film, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And he goes, "Huh!" and he goes off in a direction, and you're just like, "What?" I remember watching that at the time, thinking, "What the hell is
in the rough cut?" Don't they? In the deleted scenes, they've cut before that bit even happens.
They've cut before, and it's not supposed to be there. Obviously, this is this is the quandary that we find ourselves in, because what we're watching. I mean, so rather than thinking about, wow, this is going to be an epic fight, you're thinking, what was that? That was a god awful show. I mean, you have to bear in mind that for us, the original intended audience, the last thing that we saw was we'd a glorious sequence of special effects where Superman is flying into the Grand Canyon at the end of 3.
The best of his optics.
Oh, yeah. Where he's turning around in midair to kick missiles back at each other. I mean, that sequence was on TV. I think it was to advertise shreddies at the time. It was on pretty much, I remember it being on hourly. Get your shreddies now, and you boot the missiles. Oh, yeah. Great times, great days. Because, and again, even before that with the shreddies thing, I mean, when they did the transfers for the backs of the boxes, the commercial for that was the alleyway change, and that was on every 15 minutes as well. Oh, yeah. Just great.
I've got to find those clips, haven't I?
You've got to find those. The Shreddies advertisements were something else. But again, I mean, all this kind of builds into the kind of anticipation that had built up around this picture. None of your Avengers, there was nothing, there was no super. Batman 89 was still to come, which took things into another direction entirely. This, kids, was all we had. I mean, even if you're a raving Star Wars fan, which we were as well, because this was the superhero franchise, everybody loved it. Everybody kind of disowned it. It has to be said eventually, except for the hardcore people like ourselves. But it didn't have the kind of continued appeal that the Star Wars films had. But it was certainly residing in people's minds as something that was spectacular for its time. And even the casual fans remember it so fondly. Most people don't remember that there was a fourth picture. What I really love, digressing a little bit more, is especially when it comes to the difference between now and then, is that when people talk about the new films, with the Zack Snyder stuff and whatnot, and you say, oh, do you like them? He says, oh yeah, it's all right, but it's not as good as the real one.
Yeah.
And they're like, and by saying that, it's like well, it's not as good as the real Santa Claus, because that's how that's what the public perception of Christopher Reeve is to this day. It's like he was the real one. He wasn't the actor that played him. He's the real Superman. The other guys have done a decent job since, but it's not the real one.
Yeah.
And that when people ask me, why do you like it so much? Why does it stick with you? Why is it such an impression on you? That's why, really. I can't put it any better than that, because for us, especially at that age, he made
such an impression on me as a kid, because it was the only time I think I'd just been sort of mesmerised or to believe that seeing this character in a comic book sort of on the screen and represented so perfectly in from the pages. You're just reading it, these speech bubbles, but you don't have a voice for that character, and when you see Chris, you think that's how Superman acts and that's how he should sound like. And ever since then, no one has really matched him at all. I think Brandon Routh, bless him, I think, he tried his best, and I think later on down, I always said years ago when, I think I did a podcast or something saying, when Brandon gets older, he'll look more like Superman. And I think he did when they did that crossover universe thing. And it's a shame he didn't get a chance to sort of do another film, later down the line. But everyone else has sort of gone a different direction, kind of tonally with the character. And I think the more you deviate from what Chris done, it no longer feels like Superman.
Well, that certainly seems to be the way that, I think even Warners have come around to that way of thinking now. I think in this day and age where it's like, okay, so if you're a Snyder fan, terrific, because, you've kind of gotten everything that you've asked for or what you've protested for in this circumstance, but you've got all that, so you go away and enjoy that. I think that, especially given that the times that we're in, again, which are unprecedented, I think that, you can't apply that version, like you say, you can't apply that version of the character to now. I don't think that it's kind of conducive to what we as humanity need. And I just think Warner Brothers are doing this kind of, with a revisionist thing anyway, with this new Flash film that they're currently shooting in London and whatnot, and they keep hearing these little rumors bouncing around saying that Chris is going to turn up in some kind of weird, archival cameo and that kind of stuff. And Michael Keaton's back, and it's kind of like, well, a good dose of the old is probably what we need, because just as you say, that's the kind of definitive version. And at some point, you have to say to yourself, after 20 or 30 years of reimagining or kind of remaking or whatever the hell it is we're going to try next with a character, sometimes you've just got it right in the first place, and you should just leave it at that. Or you should, again, that's why it's so good that, even the comic book world has come around to the idea. Superman 78, the comic book premieres next month. I mean, how bloody exciting is that?
That's very cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so cool. And the point is, it needn't happen, But again, there's such a reservoir of adoration for this iteration of it. And you can't not mention Dick Donner, God rest his soul, when it comes to all this.
I was a bit heartbroken by that, because
I was gutted.
He was... he's an old guy. He's had a good innings, 91 years old. Yeah. But it was just, to me, it's still so out of the blue, because he's always, when he was interviewed, even just in recent years, he's always full of energy. He felt younger, felt like a guy in his 70s, or 60s. Yeah. And that was kind of the shock of it all to me. And it's also come, since when he had passed away, more people came out the woodwork, sort of their appreciation, for how good he was as a director. Because he could tackle any genre and completely nail it. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I mean, he was so youthful. His entire, I saw him interview, just like you say, with that voice and whatnot. Is that I thought he was bloody immortal. I was really shocked. Yeah. And as you say, the guy was 91 or wherever it was. I mean, God, nobody lives forever. But I think as time goes on, I think when you talk about Superman the movie, especially going forward, Dick, Chris, and Margot are going to be kind of like almost indivisible. They're going to be, that's going to be the unit that people are going to take on going forward, because it's unparalleled, in my opinion, to this day.
Going back to Superman 4, Martin, what is your favourite scene in that film? What's the one you always kind of go back to sort of say, I love this moment? This nails it.
That's easy. The UN speech. I get up out of my chair every time and clap.
Oh, amazing.
I do. I just love it. He's so Chris in this scene, to dissect it for a moment, because this was a late edition as well. I mean, if you read the Starlog articles about it,
was it?
Yes, they hadn't even scripted it, I don't think, right up until the point. No. If you read the Starlog article about it, he says that we've just written it and I hope we've got time to shoot it. And I think they've done everything. And they did it. They did the exterior at Wembley Conference Centre, or the interior, I can't remember.
It was the exterior, I think.
Yeah.
I think the interior was also used as the when Lex is kind of getting grilled by the the military or
yes,
something like that. Yeah.
that's right. In that terrific deleted scene that we like. But so from the point where he walks into that auditorium with the rest of the world, again, the global thing. I mean, I think again he was very conscious of that. He wanted to address the whole world, and the way he delivers that speech. I mean, I had to learn that speech for the Redux. I say I had to learn it. I knew it anyway. It's not like, other people dance in front of mirrors with a hairbrush singing Cyndi Lauper, but me, I knew that speech top to bottom.
Oh, man.
And when he gets up there, and he's got such a look of genuine intensity on it, and on his face. He asks politely whether he can address the delegates. He doesn't do what he would do in comics and bash through the doors and hover above everybody and levitate with his arms folded and say, "I'd like to address this Congress." He doesn't do that. He does what the polite way that we've come to expect from the character, and he just takes the stand, and he explains himself. And we can't live in fear. And I just can't stand idly by and watch us stumble into the madness of possible nuclear destruction. And the music cue is perfectly timed, and it's building up. And Margot is, she's there with tears in her eyes because she's Margot and she's superb. You get to the end of it, and the final line of, "I'm going to rid this planet of all nuclear weapons," and everybody goes, "Yeah," and so do I. And so, and then again, he walks away. And he walks off the stage and he walks down, and
he also doesn't stick around for the the applause. He's
doesn't break character, doesn't wait for the applause, and he walks past an Asian gentleman with a turban, and he looks at him and he looks it up and down and he nods at him and he just strides off, and I'm like, that's Superman. That's what he'd do.
Yeah.
And again, I can give you 1,000,001 kind of illustrations of how his performance kind of did nothing but smack you around the face and made you believe that he was the real deal, because that's the kind of thing he did.
That is definitely one of the best moments, and the musical cue really absolutely nails it. But the one scene I always go back to, it is when Superman goes to visit Lex and they have that confrontation. It's like we've been waiting for this for ages, and they both Gene and Chris get on so well, but it's like they're just totally in character, and then the music builds up, and Nuclear Man turns up, and even that's kind of a bit of a ratty matte effect when he lands. But I don't know. I think I have no problem with Nuclear Man's voice. I think I love it when he roars and he just like destroys Superman, and then Lex tells him to to sort of destroy him, and then they sort of smash together and fall off the side. Yeah, that whole bit. I love it, absolutely love it. But then after that, when they fall off, you get that awful effect. But everything preceding that is spot on, and it's probably some of Ernest Day's best photography, I think, in the film when they're inside.
It's wonderful. It is wonderful. I mean, it's very reminiscent of the kind of banter that they had in Superman the movie.
Yeah,
for a start, but that line. It's the best line in the trailer, I think, when he says, "You'd risk worldwide nuclear warfare on personal financial gain." Oh, did I love the sound of that?
Yeah.
And then he says, because he's, again, Gene Hackman, nobody wants war. I just want to keep the threat alive.
Yeah.
Isn't that terrific? Because, I mean, that is going on to this day. That is a real thing. That is a real tangible thing. I just want to keep the threat alive. And it doesn't just apply to nuclear warfare. It applies to everything these days. It's so easy to dismiss as a cinematic turd. And, maybe it is. But
the dialogue there is, Mark Rosenthal and Lawrence Connor kind of knew how to write quite well for Superman dialogue. And I think it's somewhat quite difficult to write for Superman, to get the sort of the right tone right, and they sort of get it. They sort of nail it quite well, and it's no fluff to it. It's all just straight to the point. And Chris has gone in there with his performance he's not threatening. He's just like, what are you doing now? Sort of attitude. And
what are you up to again?
Yeah. I'm on a date here. I've got 2 women on the go.
It literally is. He's literally just come away from the best scenario he could possibly wish for. He's like, for God's sake, you again. You're not where I left you.
Yeah.
And again, the script, it just bounces. I mean, how clever and how kind of ambitious to do a double dating scene where you have the same character and to flick between them, and he does that beautifully as well, by the way. I mean, the effects in that particular sequence, they work really well. If anything, it's a bit too short. I think they could have had a bit more fun with that.
Definitely. Also, but I think Sidney J. Furie just didn't cover it enough, and it should be quicker as well with the editing. But
Absolutely.
Chris is like on fire with the comedy, because when he sort of goes to meet Lacey, he almost slides over, and just goes, hi, and then sort of carries on,
I just really like, in that same scene, I like the fact that he uses both personas against each other. And so when Margot is elbowing him in the ribs saying she really likes you, so notice the dress.
Yeah.
And then she comes in, he goes, oh, hey, neat dress. And then Superman comes in moments later and he goes, good afternoon, Miss Warfield. That's a very attractive outfit you're wearing. And I remember laughing out loud at that at the cinema. I thought that was absolutely terrific, because he's playing against himself there.
Exactly. There's actually, what I was thinking about was Christopher Reeve obviously handling the second unit action sequences. Obviously what we've seen kind of being photographed as behind the scenes is the moon fight sequence.
Yeah.
And if you compare that in terms of how it's covered, the framing of the shots, it's kind of a lot different to what Sidney J. Fury was shooting earlier. If you look at that, I mean, Chris has covered it from many different angles. Yeah. Shooting like from above and shooting low, having Chris kind of fly past the camera as he's thrown by Nuclear Man. So Chris kind of had he kind of knew what he was doing in that department. I think he kind of either picked up quite a few tips along the way.
Oh yeah. He'd certainly applied everything that he'd learned in the. Because this was 10 years he'd been playing the character by this point, and so he knew what the character would do, as a persona. But then, for the action sequences, I think he knew exactly what he wanted from those two, and it is a cracking little fight. Apart from that, they should have they should have done another take of when Nuclear Man's stamping him through the ground, and you can see that he's moving his foot on the platform to straighten himself. But again, it seems to suffer from a lot of kind of like wrong takes, and that's what I think they are. I don't think half of them, were the ones that they should have put in. But again, I mean, this is 30-year-old nitpicking. It's kind of like But to kind of while we're on the topic, I mean, there's this whole movement now. They release the Fury cut business now that we've done the Snyder cut's been successful in that regard. This campaign is much older. To be fair, it's really, it kind of, it doesn't predate the release of the Donner cut, but it certainly came out the gate at the same kind of time when when this thing became a possibility. As soon as we realised that yes, the print still exists, of course we want to see it. And so there's work being done by a friend of mine named Aaron Price, who's been throwing
I know Aaron.
Digital nuance at it, and I was he kind of used me as a consultant for the first. I did the new credit sequence with him, and the Great Wall of China. Actually, that's my Hot Toys figure that he uses as a miniature in the Great Wall of China, going up to rebuild it. And he's kind of gone off on a tangent now, and he's very ambitious because he's very good, and he's throwing the whole shebang at it. But for me, I was whenever we spoke on the phone and he'd say, what about this, I'd always be trying to say less. This is 1986. It's not it's think of Life Force, think of Ghostbusters. Those are the kind of standard of effects that it should be. I mean, I'd like it to be cleaner, and I'd like the editing to be tighter, and I'd like certain shots to not exist. But don't do the whole Jurassic Park thing just because we could doesn't mean we should, and just layer the whole thing with digital. But I mean, at the same time, if what he's doing is getting the attention of Warner Archive or whomever the hell is behind getting this thing out, then more power to him, because I'm desperate to see this thing in whatever form. I
think one day, once we do eventually see it, it's going to be it is the holy grail for me out of everything. There's when we got the Donner cut, which I enjoyed for some of it, but the theatrical cut is still kind of my version and because that's one I grew up with. But it's also, I think, Superman 2. There's still another edit in that movie to make a nice compromise between Lester and Donner to create this sort of ultimate version. Because
I agree.
The way the movie starts, I love the opening title sequence. I love the stuff in Paris. It starts off with a bang. The Donner cut, I think there's even less Superman on screen, which is a bit of a shame. And the whole reversing time stuff, but everything with Brando was just glorious.
It was,
seeing an extended cut of Superman 3, I'm not fussed about. All I want to see is that opening title TV cut credits in widescreen. That is it. Everything else can be left in the
The credits of 4, yeah, credits of 3. Sorry, with it, yeah.
Yeah, that's all I want to see. But Superman 4, because it's like a whole movie in my eyes that we haven't seen, and it's more of Chris. That's what I want.
Well, in many ways, it's kind of the last kind of it's the only thing left. I mean,
Yeah.
from that era. I mean, we've had so many Blade Runner is it's done. It's every version of it is out there. I mean, even Rocky IV is getting a new treatment. It's kind of the only thing that is left to kind of get from that era, and that's why I think probably my life's work will be complete when it does actually arrive with us. I mean, I'm mad keen to do a commentary on it and to talk all the way through the whole thing with you. That would be awesome.
That'd be good.
It would be really good. I think that certain things have changed since '06 in regard to the rights to the music. I think Paul Fishman of Reflex has been settled with, or whatever the term is, to use the music. And I love his music, by the way.
Oh yeah, Revolution Now is like the best.
Revolution Now.
They're so well produced. I think overproduced actually. There's just so many layers to them, and he did an incredible job. And it's a shame that it took so long for it to come out, because back then, Martin, because the album was going to be made, wasn't it? It was going to come out.
Yep.
Suddenly, the whole footage has been cut. All this music is not going to be in the film. They decided to can it. I mean, it's like that was the thing when I started collecting at the time, because you'd already started, years before me, and this was late '90s, probably like '97. Like going on eBay, finding stuff, couldn't find Superman 4 soundtrack. And it was like the soundtrack I adored. And it was like the one where, as a kid, you get the tape recorder, put it up to TV, and record the opening credits and the end title music. That was it. It sounded so good. And when couldn't find an album. Were you hunting for an album back then in '80s?
No.
Oh, you weren't?
No, I knew that it wasn't coming.
Oh, really?
I knew it wasn't coming. Yeah.
Oh.
I knew it wasn't coming. How did I know it wasn't coming? I think I'd read it had been cancelled. And I think it was one of the many things that were cancelled. They just washed their hands of it. As I say, it was supposed to be a big thing to tie in with '88, the 50th anniversary. I think there was an action figure line and everything planned, and they just dumped it. Yeah,
Fuck.
I think so. And if not then there was one that was part of the deal for Superman 5. Salkind had, because, cut a long story short, due to the whole canon collapse, the rights had reverted to the Salkinds, and Alexander was out for his European backers again, selling Superman 5 with absolutely nothing attached to it, no star, no crew, anything. But he got the property, and he'd got the rights, and so an action figure deal was part of that. Which, again,
but Chris never sold his likeness, though. Chris never sold his likeness, so the figure would have been, I probably would have been one of the Toy Biz kind of figures.
Maybe, maybe, but again, this was a different time by then. This was like 1991 something, and this was there was after Batman, there was a massive expectation about the merchandising and whatnot. So I think you find that he would have been brought round. But what's heartbreaking for me to this day is the fact that if you're watching speak about it at the Dixie Trek convention and such like, that even after everything that had happened, even after he'd gone on TV and been humiliated and had to say, yes, we ripped people off, that he still said, yes, I was still up to, if they could have promised me that they would have put the same kind of commitment financially into a Superman 5, I would have been the first person to sign up. I mean, that was kind of contrary to everything he was selling in magazines at the time. But Christ, that was the only question that they ever asked him. And as an actor, you would be sick of that. I mean, it's like I'm doing that. I'm in a play in Williamstown, and it's a lovely, based on a fantastic literary work. Chris, but are you going to do another Superman film? You must have been like, for Christ's sake.
That's a lot of actors. I think even like Mark Hamill. People want to talk about Star Wars, but if you talk to him about something else, like another movie, he would be like, oh, I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Everyone listening, if you want to talk to your favourite actor, mention a film that doesn't get much recognition, you may get their attention.
Yeah, but I just thought it was really, I think by the early '90s, I think he kind of almost resigned himself to the fact that, like, look, I did a good job. I mean, I won a BAFTA for this. And it's about time that I stopped pushing it away. And if the possibility came up where we could make a really good slam dunk conclusion to the series, you know, of course I'd want to be part of that, and of course you would be, but sadly it just, you know, it's heartbreaking that it never came to pass.
The 90s were a bit of a kicker for Superman fans, really, I think, because when I fully got into Superman, come early 90s, they killed off Superman in the comics. I was gutted.
Yep.
Didn't know he was going to come back like a couple of months down the road. You know, we had this Lois and Clark show, which I premiered on my bloody birthday on BBC One, and I was kind of a bit gutted by it. I didn't like it. It wasn't my Superman. I sort of come to kind of, you know, somewhat enjoy it over the years, you know, with all the repeats and stuff. But also we just had Superboy. I kind of enjoyed that, but on ITV, I think they only showed like half of season 1 and disappeared.
Oh yeah,
you had to get Sky to see the rest, you know.
Yeah, it wasn't treated well.
No, and then like Christopher Reeve had his accident, and I was just gutted, absolutely gutted, and then because there's all this kind of rumblings, you know, the Fantasia magazine, Superman, you know, maybe coming back, Chris Reeves is in talks and stuff like that. So excited. And then, you know, nothing throughout the 90s. And as a Superman fan and collector of Chris Reeve stuff, it was just like you had to find the old stuff and pay silly prices. Actually, back then it was actually a lot cheaper collecting Superman stuff. Now there's too many people, you know, with everything.
Is there ever?
I
mean, just look at what Prop Store manages to, you know, the kind of figures that they're commanding recently with the props and whatnot. I mean, it's never going to come down. It's only going to go one way, and that's it. But
and the Christopher Reeve suit, isn't it? The Christopher Reeve costume is probably the most valuable movie prop, isn't it? Costume, isn't it?
It is the holy grail. I mean, the cape alone went for X millions of dollars. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, there was a time during the early 90s where the rumors surrounding Superman 5 were fairly constant. So there was no reason not to believe it wasn't going to happen. Yeah. I mean, I've spoken to you about this. I mean, if there's anybody listening out there to this, if anybody out there has on videotape, there was an interview with Christopher Reeve and Paula Yates on Channel 4's The Big Breakfast around 1992 or so. And she's talking to him on the bed, which she was prone to do. And she spoke about, you know, why it was a very casual conversation, actually. And it was different to Christopher Reeve's other interviews where he's very well presented and he's kind of very well spoken. This was like he was dropping in a conversation between two friends. It was very interesting. And Paula tells him about how she and Bob, being Bob Geldof, reminisce about waiting in line to go and see the first one and how what a wonderful effect it had on people and stuff. And she puts to him, not in a, so Chris, when you're doing Superman 5, she says, well, why not do another one? And he kind of goes, yeah, well, I mean, that's probably going to happen. He says, the script I've read isn't too bad. I'd love to know which version of it was. And he says, but people were ripped off with the last one, and if I did it again, I'd want the same kind of money and time and effort invested into it as the first one. I want it to be a slam dunk, go out. And then she asked him some weird question about going into politics, and because he's got a jutting jaw that he'd be really good for it. And he kind of looks a bit bewildered.
I think, honestly, if Chris hadn't had his accident or passed away, I think he would have done more politics. I think he would have been, the guy out there sort of maybe jumping into that sort of area more often. Because if you see, he was quite, a bit of an advocate for sort of, the Democrats and supporting them during the 80s. And I think in one book he has a bit of a heated argument with Donald Trump. So
really,
yeah, that Man of Steel biography.
He was always an activist, always an environmentalist, and always always. I mean, I'm glad his son has taken that forward with the because watching Will Reeve talk on TV now is really, really good in an odd kind of way, because his inflections and the way that he presents is just so reminiscent of his dad.
Yeah, and it's do you think, Martin, that we would have got a Superman 5 if Chris didn't have his accident? Do you think we would have got something? Because I know Warner Brothers probably were just for so long didn't know what to do with Superman because they had no star. They had no guy like Chris anymore.
I remember very well that Dean Cain turned up on a Saturday morning kids show, and he was being asked questions. And one kid, I wish he'd come forward now, because I could embrace him, because he said, have you ever met the big screen Superman, Christopher Reeve? And Dean Cain is sat there and he visibly looks kind of like insulted. He goes, well, what does that make me, the small screen Superman? And I remember standing up at the time going, yes, it does.
Standing up going, yes,
it does. And he says, no, I haven't met him, because again, he was still very much forefront in people's minds, and and long may that continue. But yeah, Lois and Clark was an interesting one. I mean, I thought Terry Hatcher was gorgeous, and I thought that she was Lois Lane. He was certainly more appealing. Yeah. For the show than he was. He kind of confused me because he just looked odd, and the suit that they put him in was just awful.
It was shit.
I think that it killed off the film franchise. I think that Warner's thought, we've got this new 90s appealing to housewives thing going on here, and I think that's just the direction we're going to take it. And the big screen version has had its chance, and it's blown it. And then the Sarkines went and lost all their money and fell out, and there's a whole series of
Chris Columbus debacle.
Columbus killed it. Yeah.
There's a great, if anyone listening, it's got John Glenn's kind of book on the Bond films. There's a whole chapter dedicated to Christopher Columbus, and it's like the disastrous production it was. Very interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
John Glenn directed Columbus, did he? Gosh.
That was it. I think it's like his last movies he did, I think, maybe.
Wow.
Before he kind of bowed out. But it's crazy. That film, that's a whole book in itself, I think.
Indeed.
For a making of. But I suppose, Martin, the final question for you, really, as a Superman 4 collector and all Superman Christopher Reeve memorabilia, what is the sort of, I suppose, hidden gem or bit of information you've discovered about Superman 4 that no one's kind of known before?
Well, the most continually gratifying thing, as time goes on, is that, just like we mentioned before, more and more people come forward that were there on the day. Thanks, Dad, that I couldn't be there on the bloody day. But people that actually were there on the day, they took pictures, and they're finding me, and they're coming through, and they're saying, "Would you be? I took this. Would you be interested in seeing that?" And so it's the new old discoveries that I really love. The guy that when he flew past his office, not only sent me a bunch of pictures, but told me the story, and the story was priceless because he really put you back in that time. So I love that. The other thing I love most is the book of storyboards that I've got that was recovered from an Elstree skip. That's priceless. Yeah. And that, again, I've been able to use as kind of like a resource for anybody that's got a question, what was supposed to happen here, what was supposed to happen there. I've got all that, I've got that.
I want that.
Yeah, I'll do you a copy, King. But I have to tell you that the most precious thing probably that I own altogether is, and I've covered this in a couple of my YouTube videos, is that I have a piece of paperwork, which is you're going to love this. This is a quote for Christopher Reeve's kitchen that he's having fitted in 1986, and it's an exorbitant price. I think it's something like $8,000, which back in '86 would have been a lot of money. Yeah. But on the back of this piece of paper that was recovered from a bin in Milton Keynes Post House Hotel, in fountain pen is Chris obviously sat down in his hotel musing one evening, and he's writing the scene between him and Lois Lane on the balcony after they do their romantic flight. And it's in Chris's own hand, and he's written that entire scene.
Wow.
And there's no doubt about its authenticity and its provenance, because I've compared it to everything that he's ever signed, and so it's one of those things that has been apparently was kept in a drawer literally for decades, and then somebody found it, and it was only for the fact that his name is in type on the other side. Yeah. And it's got his London address. It's got John Williams' phone number, handwritten as well. And it also has Sid Sheinberg's entertainment lawyer. His phone number is written down there, along with another handwritten note from Chris. But that little piece of history, I mean, it's an intimate little, it's as close to Chris as one could ever probably get now. But to own that little piece of memorabilia, which would be worthless to the vast majority of people, but it's utterly priceless to me.
Wow. That's incredible, Martin. Well, Martin, thank you so much for sort of chatting to me about Superman 4. And we definitely have to do a commentary to the film, or like a watch party, perhaps, where people can, tune in with us, and we can comment on the film.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
And as we go along.
But let's get it out there first. Tell your friends, tell everybody. It's until we have it, we ain't got nothing. So let's get it out there.
Yeah.
Warner Archive, if you're listening, yes, please.
Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. And again, Martin, thank you very much for taking part.
You're welcome, mate. It was a pleasure.